You'd be hard-pressed to find a cyclist who doesn't ride on Zwift, or at least hasn't even heard of it. Zwift gives us the opportunity to complete workouts that could otherwise be impossible. It doesn't matter what the time of day it is, what the weather is, and we don't have to worry about things like traffic or junctions. It also gives us the ability to race at pretty much any time, any day of the week. We've pulled together our top tips for racing on the platform to set you up for a successful result or workout. If you like this video, please make sure to hit subscribe for more content and give this video a thumbs up. So first things first, how actually do you enter one of these events? If you don't have the Zwift companion app downloaded, start there or log into the Zwift website on your computer and locate the events section. You can find an array of different events, varying in lengths, ability, categories and terrain. If you fancy a threshold workout, opt for a TT race. Or are you in the mood for hills? Pick a route with maximum elevation. Once you've decided on the route, simply click the join button to enter the event. Complete the registration prompts and choose a category that is right for you based on your watts per kilograms that you would hope to manage to sustain throughout a race. Once that's done, make sure to show up at the start line at the designated time. Our first tip is to make sure that you are well warmed up before the event. Don't just turn up at the start line and expect your legs to be able to perform at race pace without a good warm-up. Otherwise, you'll increase the risk of injury. We recommend jumping on 15 to 30 minutes before to do an easy spin, maybe throwing in a few short and sharp intervals to get the legs prepared for what's to come. If you're new to riding or racing on Zwift, you may not be aware that you can actually draft and how impactful that can be when it comes to a race. It definitely requires some practice to perfect your skills, so think about entering a few events just to get a feel for what it's like. When it comes to drafting, take advantage of the virtual terrain. Draft other riders on the uphill sections and maybe use the downhill sections to give your legs a rest. It's a good idea to have a recce of the course ahead of the event to identify how best to expend your energy, when to surge and when to hold back. Be tactful to gain some positions in the race, such as attacking a climb or making a solo breakaway. It's another good reason to have looked at the course beforehand. Another tip is to pace yourself. It's easy to get swept up in a Zwift race, just like you would a race in real life. You need to be able to sustain the whole event and not burn all your matches in the first 5 minutes. Work with the other competitors and take turns at the front so you can utilise some of the drafting that we mentioned to have a bit of a rest in between your turns. Now, this is probably an obvious one, but to be successful at Zwift races, you actually need to train for them. Yes, the races themselves are great training, but you should also look at doing some other training around the events too. Not every workout needs to be maximum intensity, so think about mixing it up with some base miles or some hill sessions to really maximise your training. Whatever the length of the race, you really need to think about nutrition or certainly hydration. I would recommend being prepared with 1 to 2 bottles of electrolyte in reachable distance, and maybe even think about bringing a gel or two that's handy if it's a particularly intense or longer race. This is just during the race. You definitely need to make sure you are fueled well beforehand for maximum energy. Make sure you have a really great breakfast or a good afternoon snack to be fueled for the race. If it's breakfast, I would recommend having something that prioritises carbohydrates, such as porridge with a bit of peanut butter and banana, or a bagel is a personal favourite of mine. Something that's going to give you long, slow-releasing carbs and a good source of energy to make sure you have got maximum output. Your setup can be pretty important to making sure that you've had a good Zwift race. Our biggest advice is to invest in a good fan and set it up directly in front of you when you are on the turbo to keep you cool and comfortable during those intense efforts. It's also handy to have a screen set up close by with the Zwift feed and perhaps some music playing to keep you motivated throughout the race. I'd recommend a high intensity playlist. Think about looking at the SLT Spotify that we've set up with our athletes' favourite tunes to keep you motivated throughout the race. There are so many great reasons to race on Zwift. One of them being it can be quite intimidating, knowing you've got a hard session looming and you've got to do it on your own. I find I can push myself much harder if I'm in a race environment and I'm getting a bit competitive with those around me. It's also a great excuse to be social. If I've got a race coming up and I'm a bit nervous about it, I make sure my friends are doing it with me. Again, that element of competitiveness, if I know I'm racing against people I know, it definitely pushes me to go harder. It's just a great way to get that intensity training in without having to go outside and contend with the traffic and all the extreme conditions that comes with training in the UK for some of us that you wouldn't have to deal with when on Zwift. So there you have it, some of our top tips for racing on Zwift. Hopefully you found this information useful and are motivated to challenge yourself in Watopia soon. And if not, make sure to check out some of the action from the Arena Games Triathlon and see how the best pros in the business do it. We'll see you on the next video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments if you've got any more tips for racing on Zwift.